live in a death-denying culture. We fear death, we're not comfortable with it. We've become very unfamiliar with how to handle it, how to care for the dead. We don't integrate it into our normal lives. We avoid talking about death. We avoid planning for it, and we avoid being involved in the care.
It's very sad the way our culture treats death. Number one, the denial, the avoidance, the fear.
We also avoid pain at all costs. Is it more painful to be involved and to see and to care for the dead, or is it more painful to try to avoid all that and then suffer some consequences down the road?
One of the things that I like to tell people that haven't had the chance to be with a body at home and then they're afraid it might be gory or icky or scary is that I think that people think that staying away from a dead body will help keep them safe from the scary parts of death. And I would like to say it's just the opposite.
I think America's death denial culture has been accelerated by cremation. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a licensed funeral director. It is an easy process from start to finish, and it is very sterile, and it's very cut and dry. Someone dies, they are seen in the hospital environment, and 4 or 5 days later they're handed a small box with cremated remains in it. And I truly think that without some type of ceremony or ritual, regardless of whether it's washing and dressing and caring for someone at home or at a funeral home environment, the ability to not only witness death, but to care for someone after they have died is more meaningful, more helpful, and really starts the healing and grieving process all at the same time.
For many years, I was a home birth midwife. I worked with families at a very important transition in their life to give birth at home in a family setting, which was a very natural approach to that important transition. So it's not a far stretch for me now to be helping families on the other end of the life spectrum to integrate the experience of the awesome transition of death and what is happening in a natural way in their own home. Until a few generations ago, people cared for their own dead in their home. They knew what to do. Children were involved in the process, the family was around, life stopped for a while, and people came over and paid their respects, and then they proceeded to walk to the local cemetery and bury the person. A family friend or neighbor or perhaps the local midwife would come over and help the family wash and dress the body and lay them out in the front parlor. That was just the way we handled death in our culture, and it was accepted. Death was accepted as a normal part of life. I wonder what has happened over the years as we've handed death care off to be taken care of by others. What has happened to our grieving process and our acceptance of death and our lives, how our lives have changed with that change. We've also come to expect that the body will be embalmed. That process started being developed after the Civil War with large numbers of soldiers dying far away from home so that their bodies could be transported home on trains. And then we became accustomed to that, and it became a symbol of poverty if you couldn't have the body embalmed and have the funeral in a funeral home. If you had to have the funeral in your own home, it was because you couldn't afford a fancy funeral in a funeral home. We can make the death care a sacred event. This is extremely important to a lot of people in many cultures around the world. You may have heard of cultures that have a ritual washing that is performed at the time of death, or prayers, or other ceremonies. Some cultures believe that the body should not be left unattended until it's buried. And some cultures believe that it takes 3 days for the spirit to fully leave the body. Caring for the body at home allows for the expression of all of these personal beliefs and feelings in your own home in a natural setting. Many people who are concerned about the environment or who have tried to live their life very naturally embalming does not appeal to them because of the nature of what happens to the body and the use of chemicals. Unfortunately, however, most funeral homes will not allow public visitation without embalming. People have come to expect that when they go to a funeral home, the body will appear a certain way. It's more of an aesthetic reason, it's not a legal reason. So you can only have a very small number of immediate family members visit the body in a funeral home without the embalming having been done. So for those who don't want to embalm, actually caring for the body at home, washing and dressing the body yourself and laying the body out at home and cooling the body is the only way to be able to have a visitation with more people perhaps and not have embalming done. Another consideration is that cremation is not considered good for the environment necessarily. It may be a better option than others at this time, but cremation uses a large amount of natural resources and energy. To cremate one body requires about the same amount of energy as to drive across the country. And that's news to a lot of people. They think green burial and cremation are synonymous, and they are not. You also need to find a funeral director who will honor your wishes and help you with the home funeral, because a funeral director is required in the state of Michigan for two aspects of the death care: signing the death certificate and supervising the final transport to the final disposition, either the crematory or the cemetery. And there's many other things that a funeral director is very helpful with. So locating that supportive funeral director ahead of time saves you having to do that in the moment, which can be very difficult. Not all funeral directors are supportive of home funeral. It seems more natural to me to have people come to the home, to have the body there, to be able to spend some time, stop what you're doing, accept what has happened through the community support of talking to people and entering into the grief fully at that time. That seems to be an authentic way for some people to deal with death.
So that night, Mary Lynn was the first person over. The hospice nurse came and pronounced her dead. And we changed her clothes, and Beth got there an hour or two later. We ended up changing her clothes again to something that we thought she would want to have on and for people to be there with us.
I don't think that we had a clear plan about what we knew what we didn't want. We didn't know for sure what we did want. And talking to Mary Lynn really helped us to have help us know more of what we could choose from. Because all we knew at that point was what we didn't want. We didn't want to go be with people we didn't understand or know. We didn't want to be in a funeral home because my mom had no money and we hadn't been working and we didn't have the money either. And it didn't feel like a place that we wanted to hang out. It didn't feel normal to us. And we weren't sure how many people really needed to come by either at that stage of her life. So we knew it was for us. We felt at home and we were still feeling very connected to her. So it didn't feel right to take her away, but we didn't know what you could do if you didn't take them away.
This was as gentle and graceful, and I cannot imagine it any other way, and yet, again, we did not know what we were doing. But it was perfect and it was beautiful, and you gave us the space to move through that and to help direct us and to know that what our options were.
Grief doesn't come evenly. It doesn't come comfortably. It doesn't come conveniently. And I was really, for one, grateful that I could come close to her and grieve. I could back up and have conversations with other people. I could incorporate my children. I could parent them in that environment. I didn't have to go away to parent them or to feed them. We could go in the other room. People brought food, and we didn't think we were hungry, but then we saw the cream puffs, and we got more hungry. And it was like, oh, your community does carry you through this little thing. And so we were able to integrate her passing as part of life, so it wasn't, it was already large enough. It didn't have to become more disorienting.